Good afternoon, everybody here in The Hague. Hello to all participants from other parts of the world. Buenos dias in Montevideo. Welcome to this event to honor the memory of the late chair of the board of directors of the Trust Fund for Victims, Dr. Felipe Michelini, on the occasion also of Human Rights Day 2020. We are grateful to the governments of Uruguay and the Dominican Republic and Parliamentarians for Global Action for co-hosting this event. Your Excellencies, dear members of the family of Dr. Felipe Michelini, dear members of the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund for Victims, dear Registrar, Madam President of Parliamentarians for Global Action, dear colleagues and friends, this is a very special and also sorrowful event in honor of the memory of our late chair, Dr. Felipe Michelini. We have a great list of speakers today, including also from the family of Felipe. I would like to get started with the first speaker, Her Excellency Laura Dupuy-Lasser, who is the ambassador of Uruguay to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And she will be speaking from the perspective of Dr. Michelini's role in national politics, fighting for human rights, and his impact on raising the profile of Uruguay on the international stage in this respect. Before we go, can I ask everybody to keep their microphones muted during the presentations? Ambassador, dear Laura, the floor is yours. Ambassador, I'm sorry to stop you, but the quality of the connection is not very good. I'm sorry, Ambassador, the quality of the line is still not very good. If it's difficult to repair that immediately, perhaps we should go to the second speaker with your permission. And in the meantime, you might find a way to improve the line. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
I need to take that as a yes. Thank you, Ambassador. This brings me to the second speaker, Matilde Michelini, the widow of Dr. Felipe Michelini, who shall be speaking about Dr. Michelini, about him as a husband, as a father, as a brother, and as a friend, to bring the personal perspective in this event. Dear Matilda, please, the floor is yours. I apologize for the rough start of this event. Is Matilda online? Can somebody confirm?
Yes, she's online. She's muted. I requested her to unmute.
Thank you. Is there anybody who can help with unmuting?
Me están preguntando cosas. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Sus Excelencias, honorables miembros del Consejo del Fondo Fiduciario en beneficio de las víctimas, señor secretario de la Corte Penal Internacional, señoras y señores. Quiero agradecer fíjate si está el otro. Can you hear me, the translator?
Yes.
Okay. Can't hear the translator.
I'm here, Matilde.
Okay.
We heard just the beginning of the first paragraph, so maybe you can reread it, and then I will translate in English.
Okay. Sus Excelencias, honorables miembros del Consejo del Fondo Fiduciario en beneficio de las víctimas, señor secretario de la Corte Penal Internacional, señoras y señores, amigas y amigos.
Your Excellencies, dear honorable board members, dear Mr. Registrar, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends.
Quiero agradecer en nombre de todos quienes disfrutamos de la vida junto a Felipe este homenaje en su memoria en un día tan significativo como el de hoy, Día de los Derechos Humanos.
I want to thank on behalf of all of us who have enjoyed our life with Felipe, this tribute in his memory on a day as significant as today, the Human Rights Day.
Felipe dedicó su vida a la defensa de los derechos humanos. El trabajo en el Fondo Fiduciario fue una de las grandes etapas de su vida laboral con la cual se comprometió y trabajó con entusiasmo. Pero más allá de los aspectos laborales, se enriqueció con los grandes lazos de afecto construidos, a quienes hoy agradezco particularmente el cariñoso apoyo brindado durante su internación y luego de su fallecimiento.
Felipe dedicated his life to the defense of human rights. Working at the Trust Fund was one of the greatest stages of his working life, to which he truly committed and with much enthusiasm. But beyond the work aspects, he was also enriched by the great bonds of affection built with his colleagues, to whom today I particularly thank for the affectionate support provided during his stay in the hospital and after his passing.
A una temprana edad debió afrontar la tragedia del asesinato de su padre Selmar en 1976 en la ciudad de Buenos Aires. Desde ese momento honró la vida de su padre sin descanso y luchó sin reparos por la verdad la memoria y la justicia dentro y fuera de nuestro país.
At an early age, he had to confront the tragedy of the murder of his father, Zelmar, in 1976 in the city of Buenos Aires. From that moment on, he honored his father's life without rest and fought tirelessly for truth, memory, and justice inside and outside our country.
Fue un hijo devoto. Hace unos años donó su biblioteca de derechos humanos a la Fundación Felipe Michelini con la condición que dicha colección llevara el nombre de Elisa, su madre, así como le rindió a ella amorosamente su homenaje.
He was a devoted son. A few years ago, he donated his human rights library to the Zelmar Michelini Foundation on the condition that the collection should be named after his mother, Elisa, and that was his lovingly way of paying homage to her.
Con cada uno de sus 9 hermanos tuvo un vínculo muy especial que cultivaba con amor y dedicación. Durante años viajó mucho y siempre que lo hacía llamaba a cada uno de sus hermanos para avisarles que se iba o que ya estaba de vuelta en casa. Sin duda, las despedidas y los reencuentros tenían para él una significación especial.
He had a special bond with each of his 9 siblings, bond that he cultivated with love and dedication. For years he traveled a lot, and every time he always called each one of his brothers and sisters to let them know that he was departing or that he was already back home. Undoubtedly, the farewells and the reunions had a very special significance for him.
Fue un tío presente, aunque no viera por mucho tiempo a cada uno de sus 22 sobrinos. Él siempre se las ingeniaba para saber con detalle acerca de la vida de cada uno y siempre estaba para tenderles una mano. Tender la mano a un adolescente no siempre es fácil, pero él lo hacía.
He was an uncle always present, although he did not see each of his 22 nephews much. He always managed to find out details about their lives and was always there to lend them a hand. Reaching out to a teenager is not always easy, but he did so.
Con Felipe caminé la mitad de mi vida. Un enorme compañero, amoroso, comprensivo, tolerante. Él hacía de la convivencia algo muy fácil. Era extremadamente raro verlo enojado. Cada día me sorprendía, admirada por su vitalidad, constancia, paciencia, capacidad de trabajo, disposición y buen humor.
I walked half of my life with Felipe. He was a great companion, loving, understanding, tolerant. He made our living together very easy. It was extremely rare to see him angry. Every day I was surprised and admired his vitality, perseverance, patience, work capacity, disposition, and good humor.
Fue un padre dedicado y muy compañero de nuestro hijo Ignacio. Disfrutaba plenamente de las actividades que compartían. Era un placer escucharlos conversar porque se disfrutaban mutua y plenamente. Vivió su paternidad con gran orgullo.
He was a dedicated father and a close companion of our son Ignacio. He fully enjoyed all activities they shared. It was a real pleasure to listen to their talks because they enjoyed each other fully. He lived his fatherhood with great pride.
Tenía un gusto especial por los caballos, el básquetbol y el fútbol. Fueron de las pocas cosas que lograban hacerle levantar la voz. No recuerdo haberlo visto quejarse nunca, disfrutaba la vida y la vivió a pleno.
He loved horses, basketball, and soccer. These were probably the only moments that managed to make him raise his voice. I do not remember seeing him complaining. He enjoyed life and lived it fully.
Aunque podía no parecer al conocerlo, tenía un gran sentido del humor. Hacía muchos chistes, aunque a veces solo él los entendía, y se reía como un niño. Tenía, aunque muy escondida, una veta de un gran histrionismo y lograba, cuando se lo proponía, hacer reír mucho.
Although it was not always evident when you first met him, he had a great sense of humor. He made many jokes, although sometimes only understood them. He laughed like a child. He had, although very hidden, a great histrionic capacity, which made people laugh a lot when he set out for it.
Era un soñador, optimista por naturaleza, generoso y profundamente empático. Nada ni nadie le eran indiferentes. Nos atravesó porque era una persona extraordinaria con su bonomía y solidaridad, con su alegría, con su convicción en la lucha pacífica y firme por la justicia, sostenida en sólidos principios.
He was a dreamer, optimistic by nature, generous, and he had a deep capacity for empathy. Nothing and no one were indifferent to him. He lives in us because he was an extraordinary, good-natured person, with his bonhomie, solidarity, joy, and his belief in the peaceful and firm struggle for justice, sustained by solid principles.
De una nobleza sin límites, honraba con religiosidad la amistad. Era de una lealtad inquebrantable. Ha dejado un gran vacío, pero también un enorme legado que deberemos honrar con la alegría, la fuerza y la convicción que puso en todo lo que emprendió.
He had a nobility without limits, and he deeply honored friendship. He had an unwavering loyalty. He has left a great emptiness, but also a huge legacy that we must honor with the joy, strength, and conviction that he put into everything he undertook.
Felipe fue un gran cultivador de afectos. Permítanme en este instante dirigirme a él y decirle, Felipe, la cosecha fue grande. Muchas gracias.
Felipe was a great cultivator of affections, and let me speak to himself right now. Felipe, the harvest was plentiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita.
De nada.
Thank you so much, Matilda, for these warm and touching words that you spoke, describing Felipe as he was, as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a family member. Listening to you comes back to life in our memories, in our minds, and I'm very grateful for you to be with us, to share these words with us. Thank you so much for being there. Thank you to Marita for your translation of those words in such a good way. I believe now that we are able, that we have solved the solution for Ambassador Dupuy to speak to us without video, but that may improve the quality of the audio feed. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
The floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, dear Peter, for this opportunity to intervene in this event honoring the memory of late Trust Fund for Victims Chair, Dr. Felipe Michelini, and especially on this Human Rights Day 2020. Very significant date. Well, being Felipe, of course, a dear friend of the ICC system and the objectives of the Rome Statute to fight impunity for the most atrocious international crimes and to look for the participation and reparation of victims' families and also the affected communities. He was a great professional person and dear friend who left us prematurely this 19th of April 2020. I am also glad that I had the occasion to listen to Matilde Di Lorenzo, his spouse, and also knowing that all his family is present in this event, his son Nacho, his brothers and sisters, the Michelini's family, and also his closest friends. Thank you for accompanying us in this event. I think that this significant event chosen by the Trust Fund for Victims It's important because we are honoring here a true believer and a human rights activist as Felipe, an embodiment of the plight of victims of gross violations of human rights. As it was just mentioned, the Michelini's family suffer directly, but in different ways. But of course, most notably, the loss of their father, the then Senator Selmar Michelini, in an extrajudiciary execution in the oppressive times of the dictatorship that de facto governed Uruguay in the 70s, and also due in times of a coordinated repression in the southern cone of America known as Plan Condor. This is just an example of what families in general in Uruguay and in our region suffer. And that's why we place a big importance to the work, not only, of course, of the Trust Fund for Victims, but of the ICC in general. And I salute, of course, all the elected officials that are present following this event here today, and all the state parties and civil society representatives accompanying us. Dr. Felipe Michelini, if I may speak from a Uruguayan point of view as ambassador of Uruguay, was a Democrat committed to the protection and respect of human rights and the rule of law, in law and in practice. Though he was a rather low-profile person, he remained always active and engaged, working very effectively behind the scenes to make things happen. He had a vision, he was executive, he was a doer, and he did that never alone because he valued the dialogue. He was always creating bridges instead of divisions. He looked for the teamwork, the networking, the synergy of different efforts from different angles and actors to achieve concrete results. He was a true force, both in the Uruguayan society and at the international level as well. So this force was not for hate, not for revenge, not for violence, not for self-made justice in face of great injustices, but for truth, for justice, for reparation, and the guarantees of non-repetition of gross human rights violations and international crimes. This is a big legacy. And his personal and professional commitment can be appreciated in many contributions he did and will survive him. I will just mention a few today. When he, due to his background of parliamentarian and also of academician, once he became Vice Minister of Education and Culture in 2005 in Uruguay under the presidency of the late Dr. Tabaré Vázquez, where he followed the human rights dossier and also the constitutional and legal aspects, he clearly helped in the mainstreaming of human rights in all the legislation, policies, and institutions in the country. That is his legacy. I can mention as an example the law on education, which included the human rights education at all levels, matching his devotion for teaching, as he was also chair of the UNESCO Human Rights Program at the University of the Republic, UDELAR, and also shown as panelist in multiple fora, including the Ibero-American Week for International Justice organized every year in The Hague to promote the Rome Statute objectives and the work of the system and of the Trust Fund. I want also to recognize the decisions adopted by Mr. Registrar Peter Lewis, and also thank you to Mrs. Sonia Robla at the ICC for launching this year an online course on International Criminal Court in Spanish, because this was one of his dearest initiatives. He wanted to leave something to continue this task of educating persons on human rights and on international and national criminal justice. He also, of course, was devoted to amplifying this message through the region. as he promoted the Rome Statute and all the amendments in Latin America and the Caribbean. And he did that as well when he was a parliamentarian with his fellow friends and through the Parliamentarians for Global Action organization. And he really not only reaching the governments, but as I said, reaching the people, because he valued this little impact in the youngsters, in the students, the future, which are of course the future lawyers, judges, prosecutors, public officers, or simply committed citizens, respectful of human rights. So he valued that and he worked for that. He dedicated his life for that. Another thing that I would like to mention, of course, and very much related to the ICC, is the process for drafting the law on cooperation with International Criminal Court in Uruguay, Law 18026, because it was a process with the support, of course, not only the ICC, but the UN and also the ICRC, in order to integrate properly all the legal obligations that had the state of Uruguay under the international humanitarian law and human rights law. And covering and including in this law even those which didn't end up in the Rome Statute, and we are now seeing maybe included through different amendments. Many of those were already included in our national law. It is also a law that was perceived or is perceived as a model because of its comprehensiveness, because it also typified, not only it typified the international crimes, but also identified the steps for cooperation with the ICC system, and also for bringing more guarantees of transparency and participation when nominating candidates also for judicial or prosecutorial posts at the ICC. And regarding that, I would like also to mention that Felipe, as I said, didn't work alone and was very keen in mentoring people. And one of the persons he found, and of course mentoring people, competent persons for the type of post, national or international, that he was so close to. And most recently, of course, he also mentored an extremely competent woman, which is Dr. Ariela Peralta Di Stefano, who has been nominated by civil society, government, and the Parliament of Uruguay for these judicial elections of next week in New York. That shows that he also believed in women, in the capacity of women, which is not a minor thing. That speaks about his attitude toward life, the respect for persons. Felipe also was a driving force behind the first participatory platform for a true national dialogue in Uruguay when preparing the first national report for the Universal Periodic Review at the Human Rights Council. That was in 2008. I was by then the director of human rights at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I can say what, really, I witnessed what he created. I mean, the atmosphere, the context of listening, really listening to the concerns of persons, of groups. Then he also worked a lot in the institutionalization of everything he could, and including, and most recently, of course, he promoted, very importantly, the institutionalization of the search for the remains of the enforced disappearance persons, a subject which he was leading through the Group on Truth and Justice created by the President of the Republic. But he managed to have this in a law and transfer this mandate, which is now, since 2020, in the hands of our national human rights institution. That is also a great contribution. by Felipe. So just to summarizing, because there are many aspects that one could mention about him, I think Felipe was an extremely fine representative of his country, of Uruguay, and will, of course, be dearly missed. Now it's time then to continue his legacy, to support, of course, the Trust Fund for Victims work, both in the mandates of reparations and of assistance. I am, and Uruguay is grateful for all the kind messages and initiatives that all his friends at the board of directors and at the secretariat have been taking, and particularly in thinking about a scholarship, internship, or junior professional program under his name, because, well, this is something that he would have loved to see. Not because of him, but for this idea of continuously educating person in human rights. So I thank for that initiative in particular. And also I would like to, if you allow me to mention that I am most grateful also to the ambassador of the Republic and of the Dominican Republic, my colleague, Mr. Guillermo Piña, who will be leaving The Hague already next week, because he really, well, worked very well bringing up Minerva Josefina Tavares Mirabal as the next, as the successor of Felipe, because she has exactly the profile that Felipe had. She brings all this, well, family commitment, all this suffering that allows to understand better which is the plight of victims when considering the possibilities, the programs that you can adopt to assist them, and for their integral reparation, of course, that they deserve. So I am glad to have already a successor that will follow his path, a dear friend of Felipe, because they share work moments at the level of PGA as well. So now, just to conclude, ask you to from your post and with the possibilities that you have, to continue working well, in favor of the cause of international criminal justice and reparation of victims, and therefore supporting, giving all the support to the ICC and the Trust Fund for Victims. Thank you so much. Gracias a la familia también. Cariño especial.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, dear Laura, for your intervention. And if anything, it's clear Felipe Michelini is leaving behind a very, very rich legacy in Uruguay. And he is and must be a great source of pride for the country of Uruguay, at the family level, obviously, as we've heard, but also at the political level and at the level of society. And beyond that, obviously, also in the region. And I think your intervention made that very, very clear. What we'll have now is a very short presentation with some pictures and some quotes highlighting the work of Dr. Michelini in Uruguay. It's about 45 minutes. Mariana, please go ahead. We now go on to the next speaker. I'm welcoming Ms. Margareta Cederfelt from Sweden, Member of Parliament and the President of the Parliamentarians for Global Action, where Dr. Michelini has such a rich experience as well. She'll be speaking about his work with and commitment for the PGO. Dear Margareta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Peter. Dear members of Dr. Felipe Michelini's family and dear Matilde Di Lorenzo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful to the Trust for Non-Victims of the ICC for having invited Parliamentarians for Global Action to honor Dr. Felipe Michelini, and what could be better to do it than on Human Rights Day. When I joined PDA in 2010, we had a member, Dr. Felipe Michelini, who was always putting rule of law, human rights highest on the agenda. But he did it with a smile, and he did it in a way that others feel very comfortable and joined him in his thoughts, in his beliefs, in his ideas. But he was not only talking, he was also a person who was able to do something to get a result. And I will give a short picture of the Felipe Michelini I learned to know as a member of Parliamentarians for Global Action. Felipe was a person with a strong value, beliefs, integrity, and courage. And in 2010, as one of the members from the Secretariat of PDA attended a convent in Buenos Aires, arranged by Amnesty International. And when our officer went back to the Secretariat in New York, he was very enthusiastic. He said, "We have a new member who was the most impressive participant in the entire conference. He is a statesman, but he is also a professor of law. He is a human rights activist, but he is a very strategic and analytic person. He comes from an influential background, but he is friendly and humble. He was a child when his father was killed by the military junta of Uruguay. He knows the meaning of crime against humanity better than any one of our members in our network. His name is Felipe Michelini." That's the way Felipe Michelini's engagement started. And I can just agree to the picture. That is how we, members of PDA, know Felipe Michelini, a generous, active, engaged colleague. Early in 2000, when Parliamentarians for Global Action had organized the first regional Latin American conference on the ratification and implementation of the Rome Statute in Argentina. The government of Uruguay was in the hands of the right-wing Partido Colorado, who had a majority of the parliament. The foreign minister, Mr. Didier Operti, who had led Uruguayan delegations in the diplomatic process, was ideological against the ratification of the Rome Statute. But PDA had managed to engage with Professor Felix Livinia, a parliamentarian and an academic from the ruling majority who had elaborated on a theory on the Rome Statute as a tool to give effect to the fundamental rights protected by the Uruguayan Constitution. This theory, presented for the first time in an international forum of the PDA Latin American Conference, persuaded the president of Uruguay to support ratification of the Rome Statute. When this struggle within the ruling party was taking place, Felipe decided to support a supportive role for Professor Lavinia's campaign. And with the political handcraft, with his possibility to negotiate, to convene people, to find support for the idea. It resulted in 2010, after the elaboration by the cabinet and parliament, that Uruguay became a state party of the Rome Statute. Between the end of 2000 and 2005, Felipe was a member of parliament in opposition, and he played a leading role in the global campaign of PDA for the entry into force and the universalization of the Rome Statute. At the beginning of 2002, when it became apparent that we could have reached 60 plus ratifications, where PDA played a very important role, and of course Felipe Michelini as well. Felipe proposed the creation of a de facto parliamentary assembly for the ICC, judiciary without a legislator, of democratically elected parliamentarians. This idea met the test of time as the Consultative Assembly of Parliamentarians for the ICC and the Rule of Law, named the CAP ICC, became the largest thematic event of PDA, gaining the official hospitality from national parliaments in all continents over the world. And this CAP ICC, it's still alive, and it's very well visited with speakers, from ministers, members of parliament, from different party blocks, different parties. It doesn't matter. It's just in the support of the Rome Statute. And this was also very important when it came to Dr. Felipe Michelini's political work. In PDA, we are members from all political parties, from left to right, from the center right, from the green, it doesn't matter, as long as we work together. And Felipe Michelini had the skills to talk to everybody. It was in his mind to go for the solution, to make friends, and also for those who spoke with a true voice. I will also give another picture. In 2005, when Frente Amplio came to power in Uruguay, Felipe was appointed as Minister for Education, Culture and Human Rights. He immediately started working on the drafting of a law to fully implement the Rome Statute. The result was a legislation that incorporates the Rome Statute norms and principles in the Uruguayan law, including a transparent and merit-based procedure for the nomination of the ICC judicial candidates that has become used to validate nomination of highly qualified jurists. Dr. Ariela Peralta, I'm sorry for my bad pronunciation, who received unanimously support of all members of the Uruguayan parliament. The law contains provisions on victims' rights and became a model. In 2006, with this legislation had just become approved by parliament with an overwhelming vote, Felipe accepted to present it to PDA members. In his address at the Tokyo session of the PDA's fourth Consultative Assembly of Parliamentarians for the ICC and the Rule of Law, which paved the way for the unanimously approval by the two chambers of the Diet of Japan in early 2007. And when Felipe left the cabinet, he became the most active board member of PDA. In 2010, he first led our team at the Kampala session of the 6th CAP ICC, and as well the PDA delegation for the Kampala Review Conference. And I will always remember 2012, when I was a new member of PDA, we had a meeting at UN, and Felipe were holding a speech on the importance of victims' rights. And I can tell you, everybody was listening. everybody was listening, and it was a huge discussion with him afterwards, not to oppose him, but with him, what he saw as the most important issue and what politicians can do. In 2012, Felipe enthusiastically supported the PDA team in organizing the largest annual forum of the organization. It was in Rome, in the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute. Over 300 parliamentarians from all over the world attended. And it was thanks to the Speaker of the Italian Parliament. In 2014, Felipe continued to lead PDA, this time in Rabat, in Morocco, for the 36th annual forum. And in the meantime, Felipe inaugurated a series of PDA Montevideo's seminars for Latin American legislators, leading to many successful legislative initiatives implementing the statute into national law. After Felipe left Parliament and politics, he didn't leave his global network, and he redoubled his efforts to contribute to the fight against impunity for the most serious crimes of international concern and to serve the rights of victims in Uruguay, in Latin America, and here in the Rome Statute system in Hague. In this uniquely important international jurisdiction, he was the essential of the trust fund for victims. In the life of Felipe, a man of principle, who deeply believed in consistency and coherence between words and actions, we can find an inspiration for every member of Parliament who decide to work and serve the peoples, and particular those who are victims of impunity. Felipe built his everyday life advancing strategies and ideas through concrete and tangible actions that in long term were designed to bring about change and advance the respect of human rights for all, as well as access to justice. He was a friend and a loyal colleague in all circumstances, and we shall all continue to do what Felipe expects of us, to fight for human rights, justice, and equality in all possible, realistic, and visionary ways. And we should never give up. Felipe did always hold his family very highly. And I remember when we were traveling all over the world, he was looking for something to bring home to his family. But he did also show pictures on his horses, and pictures where his son, Nacho, was riding the horses. It was always a pleasure because he looked so happily, always when he talked about his family. For those of us who had the honor to know Dr. Felipe Michelini, the world had been a little bit brighter, and we will remember him with respect, and we will always see him as a model for the principle of human rights and the rule of law. And Felipe showed really that politics and politicians can make a difference for human rights if we dare. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Cederfeld, for your intervention, describing so powerfully Dr. Michelini's association with PGA, as a person, as a politician, as a colleague, and your words have conveyed that very, very strongly. We have an next intermezzo coming up with some pictures and also quotes of Felipe from during his association with the PGA. let me turn to the board of directors, the members of the board of directors, who were Felipe's colleagues at the Trust Fund for Victims, for their brief reflections on Felipe as a colleague and as their chair. I would like to start with the current chair of the board of directors, Mama Kwate Doumbia. Please, Mama.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Vous m'entendez bien? Vous m'entendez bien?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Mesdames, messieurs, distingués invités, c'est avec une grande émotion que je prends la parole aujourd'hui.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I am full of emotion as I take the floor before you today.
Excellence, Madame Laura Dupuis, ambassadrice de l'unité, vous qui nous avez reçus à chaque session du Conseil chez vous pour nous offrir à boire et à manger, merci.
Your Excellencies and all distinguished guests, those of you who took part in the meetings and received us and hosted us, I would like to say thank you to all of you.
Ma très chère Mathilde et cher Ignacio, je vous exprime toute ma compassion pour toute la souffrance que vous avez eue avec cette perte cruelle.
Dearest Matilda and dear Ignacio, I would like to express to you all my compassion in this very particular and tragic circumstance.
Mesdames, Messieurs, vous tous, distingués invités, chers amis, chers membres de la famille de Felipe, cher Felipe, je vous exprime une fois de plus mes condoléances les plus émues.
Ladies and gentlemen, and dear members of the family of Felipe, once again, I would like to extend to you my sincerest condolences.
La mort tragique et prématurée du docteur Michelini en avril a été un choc pour nous.
The tragic and premature death of Dr. Michelini was a great shock for us.
En honorant sa mémoire et son héritage à l'occasion de la Journée des droits de l'homme, le Fonds tient à souligner
In honoring his memory and his legacy on Human Rights Day, the fund underscores that Dr. Michelini was above everything else a defender of human rights.
Felipe était au-delà de nos relations professionnelles un ami et même un confident. Il me consultait sur toutes les questions relatives au fonds.
Well beyond our professional relationship, Felipe was a good friend and a confidant. He consulted me on every single issue relating to the Trust Fund for Victims.
Grâce à moi, mettre à l'aise dans le travail. Grâce à moi, et pour mettre à l'aise ce travail que nous faisions ensemble dans le fond, puisque je ne comprends pas français et anglais, Philippe est allé apprendre, renforcer ses connaissances en français. Merci.
Because of my inability to follow the meetings well in English, Felipe made a great effort to intensify his mastery of French so that I should feel better at ease.
Il supportait mes trop longues interventions et me taquinait souvent en disant « Maman Koité, tu ne prends plus la parole. » Aussitôt, il me redonnait la parole en disant « Oui, tu habites sur un continent où s'exerce trop de violence en ce moment. »
He even tolerated my lengthy interventions and speeches, and he would tease me by saying, Mama Koite, I'm not going to give you the floor any longer. But then he will immediately give me back the floor and say that I hail from a continent where there were very violent conflicts currently ongoing.
Quand nous sommes allés en Ouganda en visite de terrain, tu as dit, Philippe, maman, vous avez autant de problèmes et de victimes. Je te comprends maintenant. Je comprends tes réactions et ta passion pendant les réunions du conseil.
And when we traveled to Uganda on a field trip, he told me, Mama, now I understand you. You have as many problems as you have victims. I understand your reactions and your passion during the meetings of the board of directors.
Philippe m'a fait rêver en invitant le conseil à visiter son beau pays, l'Uruguay. Hélas, Philippe, tu es parti en laissant ce dossier sur ta table.
Felipe advised me on the several issues and had certain projects that were pending. Unfortunately, Felipe, you have gone away and left all those things on the back burner.
J'ose espérer que Dieu t'accordera la grâce et la miséricorde pour tous les efforts que tu as fournis en défendant les victimes partout.
I dare to hope that God will grant you His grace and His mercy for the efforts that you have made to defend victims everywhere.
Cette décision du Conseil de commémorer ta mémoire en créant cette bourse en ton nom n'est qu'un mérite pour éterniser ta mémoire.
This decision of the board of directors to commemorate your memory by setting up this scholarship in your name is something that is only fully deserved, and this is in order to make your memory eternal.
Je dis aux étudiants bénéficiaires d'honorer la mémoire de notre ami et collègue Philippe.
And to the students who will benefit from those scholarships, I strongly urge them to honor the memory of our friend and colleague Felipe.
Dors en paix, Philippe, tu laisseras gravé dans nos mémoires.
May you rest in perfect peace, Felipe, and you will forever be engraved in our memories.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Je vous remercie, Maman, pour vos mots forts en commémoration de Felipe. Et I'm currently passing the word to Ms. Minu Tavares Mirabal, who succeeded Felipe in the board of directors. Minu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. Hola, Matilde. Hola, Cecilia, Elisa, Nacho, Selmar. Con ustedes a toda la familia de Felipe, a los que conozco y a los que no conozco. Un grandísimo abrazo desde aquí, desde la República Dominicana, desde la casa museo en la que Felipe quiso siempre que trabajáramos conjuntamente con la Fundación Selmar Michelini, y que tengo el compromiso con Cecilia de hacerlo. Having said that, I want to say hello also, apart from the family, to my colleagues and to and to the ambassadors, the ambassador of Uruguay, and everybody that is there. And especially I want to say hello to all my people in PGA that I see there, my beloved people in PGA, where I had the opportunity to meet Felipe Michelini in 2002 when we were both parliamentarians. We had a common project working on the campaign of parliamentarians for global action to achieve the universality of the Rome Statute, which established the International Criminal Court. Felipe and I also shared a tragic past. Our families were directly affected by impunity and lack of rule of law. My mother, Minerva, and her sisters, Patria and Maria Teresa, and their driver, Rufino, were killed in 1960 by dictator Rafael Trujillo. 16 years later, on a great 20th May, Selmar Michelini, Felipe's father, and 5 other persons were assassinated by the Uruguayan and Argentinian dictatorships Plan Condor in 1976. Felipe's spirit was defined by a formula, equal parts his sensitivity and the pain from the assassination of his father and the repression suffered by thousands during the dictatorship. This resulted in an absolute belief in the need to prevent atrocities and to restore victims' dignity through accountability. His ethics and his political and social commitment made him the outstanding advocate we all admire. If there was anyone capable of inspiring, leading, and galvanizing collaboration towards international justice and the rule of law, it was Felipe. If there was anyone capable of making seminal contributions to national politics, academia, and global advocacy to build a world governed by law and to ensure accountability of those highest in power, it was Felipe. If there was anyone who deeply cared about ensuring that the Victims' Trust Fund would be truly efficient, it was Felipe. For this, Felipe had started going door to door to ensure all states parties contribute to the fund, even if symbolically. Last year, the Assembly of State part at the Assembly, at the ASP, he made the board accountable to the proper administration of those resources, and he was committed to see enhanced impact in the trust fund's activities. Because I could not fail him nor his commitment to a fairer world, is that I am now in his position at the TF board of directors. I am committed to work with colleagues to continue his legacy in the path he had crafted based on extensive consultations to support the trust fund. I am honored to be working at the service of the Assembly and the victims under the Rome Statute crimes. Yet, from the depth of my heart, I wish it was him who was here. I am forever grateful for having had him in my life as a friend. His persona was a beautiful gift. His memory should continue inspiring us to carry out the projects that he promoted as president of the TFV board of directors, all which were geared to strengthen the role that the TFV should play in its essential obligation to provide meaningful reparations and prompt assistance tu víctima. Gracias por este homenaje tan merecido y un gran abrazo a toda la gente de Felipe en todos los países, en todas las partes de este mundo que él quiso mejor. Gracias.
Thank you, Minu. Those were really powerful words that you spoke today in honor of Felipe. Can I ask now Baroness Minka Helic to take the floor, please?
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Dear Mrs. Michelini, dear members of Felipe's family, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, and dear friends. My name is Arminka Helic, and I represent Western European and other states on the board. And I had the honor of calling Felipe a friend. I met Felipe when he joined the board to represent Latin America. I remember him as an extremely capable and modest man who in his heart was a fierce fighter for the rights of those who have none, but who in his manner was the gentlest and the kindest person I have ever met. A quiet man with a strong voice for all the voiceless, tireless in support of victims of violence across the world, and an inspiring leader. I learned many things from Felipe. First, I learned to listen. Second, to respect. Third, to act. And fourth, I learned that Uruguay is one of the most beautiful places on earth. This was something that Felipe impressed upon me and upon whole board. His passion for his homeland was infectious, to the extent that I have found myself speaking of Uruguay with enthusiasm and excitement, even though I have never visited the country. It is a source of sadness to me that we were not able to make the visit to his homeland last year as a board that Felipe had imagined and planned for us all. But one day, and one lasting influence that Felipe has had on me is that I am now determined and committed to visit Uruguay. Felipe made a huge contribution to the work of the board. But most of all, I considered him to be a friend, someone I always looked forward to seeing on my visits to The Hague, and someone I looked up to. Over coffee or walking to our meetings, we discussed world events, his beloved homeland, and his plans for making the board work better and function better. He introduced me to the Commission for Missing Persons and the work that they do. And he was never tired of discussing politics with me. He would even have time to discuss my homeland, Bosnia-Herzegovina. He was prepared to tease me about Brexit and Britain. And he was always, in the nicest possible way, able to bring me to his way of thinking about the country that I live in. I would often leave The Hague thinking that Brexit is the craziest idea, even though I would arrive thinking that Brexit is the way forward for Britain. So I will miss his guidance, and I will miss his humor and his humility. I'm so grateful to have had an opportunity to know him, and I will always remember what he taught me about humanity and what connects us regardless of wherever we come from. He was an inspiration to us all. For me, I cannot emphasize it enough. He was someone I admired and aspired to emulate, and someone I took freedom to call my friend. I want to thank all my colleagues. I want to thank, above all, Felipe's family, knowing that a large part of who Felipe was must also have been down to the influence and love and support of those who loved him and those who will miss him most. I hope that one day we will be able to meet in Uruguay. And until then, I can give you my promise that we, the board, will continue our work, hoping to live up to his memory and to his standards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Baroness Halic. I'd like now to give the floor to Sheikh Mohammed Bilal, also from the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund.
Thank you, Peter. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Madam Michelini and Michelini family, members of Michelini family, Your Excellencies, members of the court, my fellow board members, Madam Chair, Mama Kote, and all of you who are attending this great event. For me, Michelini is something that I think I am kind of saving for kind of when I'll have time to have a say with my God, I will ask him, why did he take him so early? He was so full of passion and ideas and compassion and empathy. I don't know, he's a total package. I can't say that what he was missing. I truly consider myself as fortunate and lucky to have not only known him, but to have worked with him and kind of find him as my own leader, mentor, when I joined the board. Indeed, I came to know him even before joining my board because I was working at that time as Bangladesh ambassador to the Netherlands. And as I was taking interest into the affairs of court and the issues of victims, so I used to attend their event. And that's where I came to see him. And when we started working together, I used to enjoy a lot the soft kind of the tussle that I used to have between Mama and him, which Mama so lovingly recalled about the giving floor and other things. And in that thing, I always try to ask him, try to know him that, because I had a sense that he's always had a sense of this kind of, he always wanted to push and rush. I used to ask him, why so rush? Because at that time, even in the trust fund, we are going through a phase. And I came to see that how seriously he was kind of dive into it and make all of us into that part and build a team and try to get to the bottom of it and then bring a solution. So his energy, his enthusiasm, more importantly, his dedication for the victims is something that I think we are privileged to see up close. I don't know how much justice we can do, because human rights is something that you just cannot just say it only for the sake of saying. It's more than a religion. You have to first believe in it. You have to practice it and make it a part of your life. And one day I can recall that in my embassy at that time, I was hosting this event for the countries who are not yet member of the court, just to share the affairs of trust fund victims. So I hosted a small event in my embassy. And in that time, as we are waiting for the guest to arrive, I was asking him that, Michelini, human rights, it seems to me that to you it's more of a legal rights. But I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the law. But to me, it's a moral thing. So which one do you take? Then his answer was such a human one. He said that, look, I was a parliamentarian and a practitioner. So I began it as a moral one. now for me, it's more of a legal one. And this is kind of his mission, that how much he can now contribute legally to make it kind of build a wall to safekeeping these human rights. So his total life, his everything that he did is a package. And that's the finest human being we are so privileged to know of. And I'll not take much of time, but as I said that I'm saving this thing, when my time will come and I'll have a say with the God. But in my religion, they said that God take them early, those who he likes. So maybe he's having another mission on the other life. Madam Michelini, I think you know it well, then we know that he has one kind of a very unique habit. I just want to make the situation a little light because it's becoming too heavy. Whenever we had something to discuss serious issues, Peter, I think many of my colleagues will witness it. He has this habit of doing this. He used to do these things, and I think we used to ask him that, is there any nail left? Because the way he is. So this is his habit of kind of always thinking and try to do that, how he can improve on what he is doing. And this is something, I think, an unique a thing that you just cannot learn. You have to have it. So he was blessed to have something in him that inspired so many of us. And we now, whatever it is, at least that committed that. I don't know it's more legal or moral. The thing is that human rights is something you have to preserve. And when you talk about human rights, I think there's issue of PGAs here. And the issue of this enforced disappearance and the missing persons, this is the aspect I will request and urge all of you who are practicing these things to be more attentive to this aspect, because those of us who are still a witness of that kind of widespread practices in some parts of the world, I think at times enforced disappearance and missing is worse than the killing, because the family, they don't know where do they go on the day of their birthday or a special day to lay a rose or a flower or a bouquet. So this is another discussion I had with him, but it will be a longer one. All in all, I would like to conclude by thanking our registrar and our executive director, Peter, and all of you who have worked hard to arrange these things, because I know that at these hours of the time, the moment that you are dedicating for him is something that always encourages us to do more. Because if I know that at least when my time will come, that there will be someone who will recall, then I think it's inspiring. I salute you. And Madam Michelini, I think it was an honor and privilege to have worked with your husband. And I will testify, I remain a witness on the other side to say that heaven is where his abode should be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bilal, for your words. We have one final board member who could not be here today, unfortunately, because of other commitments, but we have a short video given by Mr. Gotcha Lorkibanidze, member of the board from Georgia. Please go ahead and play.
A trust fund for victims. We are marking Human Rights Day each year. Yet this day is very different, as it is emotional because we no longer have around Dr. Felipe Michelini, chair of the board of the Trust Fund, relentless defender of human rights, our dear colleague and friend, who wanted stronger than anybody else to achieve reparative justice for victims and survivors. Under his leadership, we have changed things that once thought cannot be changed. He pursued his mission with wisdom, grace, dignity, and compassion. While Felipe Michelini left a void in his family, friends, as well as the Trust Fund for Victims that cannot be ever filled, we are bound to cherish and continue his legacy and appreciate the impact he had on people and institutions. It is said that the world cannot be better than the state that constitute them, and the state cannot be better than individuals that constitute them. Dr. Felipe Michelini made us and the world better. So the only way, the best thing that we can do is to stay the course. That's why his wishes and thoughts, his legacy is ingrained in every step we are undertaking for the Trust Fund for Victims. Thank you.
After this, we'll have a very brief intermezzo again with some pictures and quotes highlighting the work of Mr. Michelini with the Trust Fund for Victims. Now, I would like to give the floor to the Registrar at the International Criminal Court and advisor to the Board of Trust Fund for Victims, Mr. Peter Lewis. Peter, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm very privileged to be able to say a few words about Felipe this evening in the presence of his family, knowing, of course, as I think so many other people have said, just how important his family was to Felipe. I first met Felipe when we attended a conference together in Ecuador. We were both delegates there, and I had my first meeting with him, a chance to spend an hour to get to know him. I'm embarrassed to say that when I first met him, I did not know his personal story, and I did not know his exceptional record of public service at that stage. I left that first meeting incredibly impressed with this quite extraordinary man. Of course, like so many others have said, one could not meet Felipe without realizing his deep commitment to victims and witnesses and a real desire to do something to help them. But he wasn't just an idealist. He also really understood the practical issues that needed to be addressed and was willing to place his time and effort into solving those problems. So there was a deep, not just a deep moral commitment, but also a very personal commitment to make a difference and do what it took to improve things. I left that meeting, that first meeting, really impressed with the man I just met, wanting and looking forward to working with him. But there was something extraordinary as well, and something really rare event for me. I left that meeting feeling I'd made a friend, even in that short time. Now, I was very fortunate thereafter to be able to work closely with Felipe, and particularly when he became the chair of the board. And I want to pay tribute not just to him, but the other board members this evening. For those of us like me who are fortunate enough to this work to be my day job, the board members are of course volunteers, giving their precious time when they've got so many other things to deal with, dealing with an institution many thousands of miles, sometimes from where they are, and it requires a huge amount of personal commitment, and that certainly was a commitment that Felipe made to the trust fund. As I say, we worked very closely together, particularly over this year, this incredibly eventful year, and I was speaking to him every week. During that very close meeting and engagement with him, my admiration for him only grew, not just for his commitment, but his professionalism, his wisdom, his humor. He was never down, his energy, never deterred by the problems, only committed to trying again and trying to make a difference. Now, the court has lost a real exceptional servant, an exceptional man, an exceptional servant. I've lost an exceptional friend. But the extraordinary thing about him is, I honestly think I'm a better human being for having met him. So I'd want to say thank you to his extraordinary family too. What an exceptional, extraordinary man. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis, Registrar at the International Criminal Court, expressing your memory of the relationship, the very important relationship that you had as Registrar with him, and through him also with the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund. Your Excellencies, dear Matilda, dear family members of Felipe, dear members of the board, dear colleagues and friends of Felipe, I've got the honor of being the last speaker, but also the burden. And I would like first to express my deepest appreciation for everybody who spoke so eloquently and so deeply felt about Felipe today. If we have prepared today's event as a commemoration of Felipe, I think I can speak for many of us to say that we are actually experiencing this as a true and very emotional celebration of Felipe, who he was, how he was, and how he affected our lives. And if anything has become clear, it is that Felipe has left an indelible imprint on those who were part of his life, personally and also professionally. Nobody's been left untouched by his personal warmth, his professional drive as a human rights defender, his capability for humble leadership, his sense of justice and of history. And this is why we have chosen today, Human Rights Day, to hold this event in commemoration and in celebration of Felipe Michelini. And above all, I invite you to celebrate Felipe's commitment to action in solidarity with those who suffer from atrocity crimes, to ensure that they have access to justice, locally or internationally through the International Criminal Court, that groundbreaking institution which, through his tireless efforts at the PGA and in other ways, has gained wide acceptance and support in Latin America and the Caribbean and beyond, to ensure that victims also have access to remedy for the harm that they've suffered from the crimes under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. Felipe's association with the Trust Fund for Victims began in 2015, first as a member of the board and then as our chair. And his association is a clear testimony to his commitment to action in solidarity. At the Trust Fund, Felipe's cruel and sudden passing was a devastating experience. All of us were left in shock. His predecessors as chair of the board, Elizabeth Rain and Moto Noguchi, they rushed to express their sorrow and personal condolences. And last night, I received a message from Moto Noguchi asking me to convey to you the following personal statement, and I quote, "Felipe's passion and tireless efforts for victims' justice were powerful messages of encouragement for victims around the world who were left uncared for in the scourge of war." And at the Secretariat, there was disbelief and immediate grief. When Felipe was in The Hague, we could all feel that his interest in our work went beyond the purely professional. He reached out to all corners in the building of the court. He was a very, very good listener. And beyond The Hague, Felipe came along with a memorable field visit to Uganda, already mentioned by Mama Kote, together with the president of the Assembly of States Parties and with representatives of 9 states parties to witness how the suffering brought about by the LRA conflict in northern Uganda continued to affect victims and their communities, and to appreciate how the Trust Fund's partners provided necessary assistance to victims to alleviate their suffering and to overcome their harm. From inside the court, from around the world, we received a sorrowful pouring of condolences, expressions of grief and of personal memory of Felipe. And together with the court, we have collected these in a book of condolences, of which you can see here the frontispiece, and which will be published online after the event. And this is but one expression of Felipe's memory and legacy. In consultation between the board and the secretariat and with the registrar, the Trust Fund has decided on 2 initiatives to commemorate Felipe's association with the Trust Fund and the court, to his dedication to human rights in general, and his inspiration to young people to educate themselves and join the cause. We are deeply appreciative to the registrar for his support to dedicating a meeting room in the court's building to the name of Dr. Felipe Michelini. The room is located at the center of the Trust Fund's office in our building, and it will remind us and all who knew Felipe of him. New judges, new staff, visitors to the court will be asking about him, will be finding out about him, and he will remain a point of reference at meetings in this room. It's a wonderful way to keep the memory of him alive. And we had wanted to have an official dedication ceremony on site, but decided not to wait anymore until the pandemic would allow us. The second initiative is less tangible, but no less important. The Trust Fund for Victims is putting together a dedicated fund in the name of Felipe Michelini to enable young professionals and researchers to come to the Trust Fund at the ICC for an internship or to conduct research in the domain of reparative justice for victims within the framework of the Rome Statute. This initiative seeks to reflect Felipe's passion for learning and for action, and to enable young people with a passion for human rights and victims' justice to pursue their dream, even if they don't have the resources themselves to do so. The Felipe Michelini Fellowship Fund will be an integral part of the court's visiting professional and internship program. And we are encouraging strongly all who may share Felipe's passion for action and for learning at the court, for the Trust Fund for Victims, to provide their financial support to this important initiative to invest in future generations. We will need their support and knowledge to uphold the Rome Statute's central ambition of reparative justice for victims. I'm ending on a personal note. I've experienced Felipe to be a force of nature, full of passion and drive for perfection. He became the chair of the board in a period of great scrutiny and stress for the fund, and he could build on his previous mandate in the board. Felipe's political acumen and his warm personality were of the essence to all of his interactions. They drove his desire and his effective leadership to make things better at the Trust Fund, in the board, at the Secretariat, and in our programs. I am grateful to have experienced his leadership and to have benefited immensely from his guidance. His interest was always to find solutions which could perhaps not make all happy, but which always brought things forward into new perspectives. He had a clear understanding of his role and his responsibility as chair of the Trust Fund for Victims Board of Directors. But he also came to deeply understand and appreciate the pressures at the Secretariat and the commitment of myself and of my colleagues in The Hague and in the field. His passing put a sudden end to our intensive and always respectful interaction which I'm missing to this day. And we strive together to continue to perform and to improve in Felipe's spirit. Thank you. I realize we have been running a bit late with this event, but I would like still to open the floor to all of us who have joined us in the event. You're most welcome to share with us your thoughts and memories of Felipe, and if you wish to speak, please mention your name in the chat box, and please also keep your intervention short, if possible maximum to 1 minute, so that as many as people who have joined us today can express themselves. Thank you. I understand that the first person that is going to speak is Alex. Alex, please go ahead on behalf of the coalition. I would on behalf of women's and
Thank you
gender
very
justice.
much.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. I would like indeed to address you today on behalf of Melinda Reed, who is the acting convener of the Coalition for the ICC. Dr. Michelini was a very close friend of the Coalition for the ICC and its many NGO members around the world who are working together to bring justice through the Rome Statute system. It is therefore an honor to have this opportunity to pay tribute to him today, particularly on this day, and to share, especially with his family, our NGO's community's deep admiration and appreciation for the central role he played in our common resolve to end impunity for the gravest crimes. His outstanding legal, diplomatic, negotiation skills, his dedication to victims, his vision for the Trust Fund, his commitment to the Rome Statute, alongside his unique personality and generous heart, was and continues to be an inspiration for us in carrying out our work. On a more personal note, when I was myself in the very early days of my career working at the Coalition Secretariat, I was lucky enough to be part of the large group of young minds he has helped shape over the course of his life, something that I know is true for many of us on this call. And it is something that I will remember him doing with wonderful humor. So please rest assured that Dr. Michelini's great legacy will be maintained through the work of the Coalition for the ICC and its members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. I will now give the floor to Sylviane, please.
Good evening, everybody. I just want, my name is Sylviane Grugino. I'm a member of one of the teams of legal representatives of victims before the court. I just want to share with you this. I have never personally met Dr. Felipe Michelini, and I'm very impressed by all that I have heard this evening. I just want to honor his memory, even though I didn't know him. And I want to thank you all who have known him and who have appreciated him so much. I express my deepest condolences to his family and friends and colleagues. Really, I'm touched. And I want to thank the Trust Fund for and all the embassies, the court in general, for all that you have put together to honor such a great man. For me, it is impressive that someone I have never seen before, never met with, I can get such report about him, such testimonies about him. I'm deeply impressed. And if there is an example I draw out of it, this is it, that people do not even need to know you before you make a great impact, even over generations. I'm deeply impressed. And I say, may he rest in peace. Thank you, all of you, for what you have done so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylviane. That was really, really strong to hear from you. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak? Feel free. Judge Perrin de Brichambeau, I understand you would like to take the floor now. Please go ahead, it's all yours. Judge Perrin, can we have your contribution, please? Perhaps if he is unable to join now, we can have somebody in the meantime and then come back to Judge Perrin. Do we have another speaker, please? Deborah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you to the Trust Fund and to PGA for organizing this. I think I speak on behalf of many friends who are here. Like the ambassador said, many of us women who Felipe mentored us, and he did it in a way that was gentle, that was inspiring. We've learned so much from him. I think that there is not one day that we don't think about him when we are facing our work and we think, okay, how would Felipe face this challenge? I think Matilde has heard about us in this respect, and I just want to, join these voices to share that. As many of us are probably shy to gloat about what we think is, and as the registrar very well said, it's a special link and being marked by such a special person. So thank you for the opportunity for being here, and we hope that in his memory these meetings keep being recurrent and allows us to reflect more deeply into his thinking and to continue learning from him and to continue thinking how can we be more like Felipe. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Deborah. Very much appreciated. Judge Perrin, are you ready to come in? If not yet, is anybody else wishing to speak? I saw a request from Garro.
Thank you, Peter. My name is Alejandro Garro, and I teach up at the professor of law at Columbia University, where our dear Felipe graduated. And I just want to briefly, after having heard so dear words from the family and colleagues and friends from different aspects, I would like to add the academic aspect of intervention of Felipe in the life of the university, Columbia University, where I met him many years ago in the first program that the university had for young human rights advocates, of which Felipe was an active participant. Years later, he came back to the university to graduate with an LLM degree, a Master of Laws degree. And since then, I had the privilege to be in touch with him, no matter where he was found, in which capital city of the world he was, or where I was seated. I always was in touch with Felipe, the friend, the colleague in the bar, the author of books on human rights in many areas of human rights, transitional justice, human rights, vindication of human rights, etc. So I just briefly want to say I share the memories of Felipe as an excellent father, husband, and friend, but I also want to add as a colleague, as a student, as a friend. He was very dear in my heart. Thank you for all of you, and for you, Peter, for having chaired this group, and there's feelings that we can share with our dear Felipe. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Garro, for sharing your perspective. It's truly appreciated. David, can we go to you? David Donat-Cattin.
Thank you very much, Peter. And if I'm allowed to speak, it's very difficult on an emotional point of view of something that Felipe shared with me in his last meeting, which is a reaction to something that he didn't know. Felipe played a very important role in the Plan Condor trial in Italy. Nobody knows, but this is what happened. He's the one who asked many, many years ago if there was a lawyer who could represent the state of Uruguay in the plight of victims of Plan Condor, including Uruguayan victims, but also victims from other countries involved in the plan. And I very humbly suggested the name of a lawyer whom I thought he was an excellent one. And Felipe followed up very carefully, very proactively, as always. And this gentleman became the lawyer of Uruguay. Now, the work that he did was very controversial, very tough, very difficult. The work of the lawyer, not the work of Felipe, of course. And there was a first instance judgment condemning only the direct perpetrators of torture and enforced disappearances and mass murder, whereby all the political leaders, ministers, and so on, were acquitted. And this led to the decision also of Uruguay to maybe change the lawyer. Felipe was not involved in that decision. In the meantime, the lawyer that Felipe had indicated continued to gain the trust of the victims. And there is a single episode that is not known that I shared with him in our last meeting, which made his smile as stronger as ever. I told him that the prosecutor in charge of that case didn't really know how to win the case in appeals. And he filed the appeal 7 days in advance of the deadline. The lawyer that Felipe had indicated initially read the appeal and took it upon himself on behalf of the victims to change it completely, and went back to the prosecutor office saying, you have a few other days, this is a rewritten appeal. The prosecutor office very humbly agreed with all these points and resubmitted. And on the basis of that appeal, all the people involved in Plan Condors, not only the torturer or alleged torturer, Mr. Troccoli and others, but all the others were convicted to life imprisonment. Felipe commented on this in the Uruguayan public radio. He was featured in programs. He made the wonderful things that I invite you to look at in YouTube and other sources. But he didn't know that it was thanks to the lawyer that he had chosen to appoint that this change happened. Because if the appeal would have remained the same, we would have had still acquittals, because certain matters of law had not been dealt adequately. So the response that I had that day when we met about this issue, it was 1 year ago in The Hague, from Felipe was an enormous smile, because he didn't know that the course of history had changed because of him, and he was so happily surprised. And I really leave you with this memory that I have of him, which shows that even when you fail, if you do the right thing, in the long term, we will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing this very, very powerful story about Felipe and the way that he has an influence, even if it's unexpected, very much downstream. I'm waiting to see if there's any other speakers who would like to come forward. Please don't hesitate. We are running a bit late, but I think that's only logical, given the many powerful stories and words that we've been hearing today. We have time. If you have energy still, please don't hesitate to come forward. I see Yael.
Yeah.
Please, Yael, speak.
Sure. Actually, it's those who know me know that I'm rarely find it difficult to find words, but I do in this case, because in a sense, Felipe was the realization of the ideal leader on behalf of victims. And everybody spoke about how humble he was, which he was. He was also an extremely kind man. Even when he was critical, it was always spoken gently. And he left a sense of kind wisdom, however, with the total commitment to whatever is the best in the world of people who care about reparative justice. So while I'm on the verge of tears, so I will stop, I just wanted to say that, because I probably would have not forgiven myself if I did not express these thoughts and feelings. I hope we have more of him with the trust fund and with the court and on behalf of victims.
Thank you, Yael, for your kind words. I believe we found a solution for Judge Perrin to speak through the telephone of one of my colleagues. Please, Judge Perrin, go ahead. I'm asking my colleague Francisca, is it working? Can we hook him up?
Yeah, wait a second. Yeah.
There we go.
And reparations is an integral part of the process of this court. And the input that Felipe has been making through his personality, through his dedication, and through his inputs has been effectively showing its impact on many projects which are now being implemented and which benefits the court as a whole. So we should be collectively very grateful, and I can only join the words of our Registrar Peter Loomis and of all the members of the board for his outstanding contribution to the collective project, which is this court, and to the image he has been putting forward and illustrating for all his friends. It is through the personality and dedication of people like him that we progressively make mentalities and expectations met and move forward. And I would like once again to pay my respects to his memory and to his family. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much, Judge Perrin, and I'm happy that we've found a way to have your voice heard and contribute also to this event. It's very much appreciated. I'm looking to see whether any of the other participants today would like to say. It's 7 o'clock. We've been 2 hours, but it feels much shorter because there are so many strong and good interventions so far already. And please, if anybody wishes to speak, there's still space for that. If not, I think then it's time to go to the end of this event. There's no more mentions in the chat box. It's 7 o'clock, as we said before. It's perhaps time to wrap it up. I am, on behalf of my colleagues, I believe, and a lot of people here, so very grateful to everybody who came forward and be with us today, to speak so powerfully about Felipe. I'm extremely grateful for Matilda, Felipe's wife, and his family to be here with us and to share their story of him. We've heard incredible testimonies of his warmth and how he influenced people just by being himself, but also by embodying what is good about the pursuit of rule of law, human rights, fight against humanity with the International Criminal Court, the fight for reparative justice for victims, with the Trust Fund of Victims, to make those words a reality, not only on paper, but also in the realities of victims, which is so much different from what we experience in the places where we are. And that memory, that commemoration, that legacy, that celebration of his life was powerfully felt today. I think it has been affecting all of us, even as we have heard those who did not know him. It is powerful. And let's hope that we are able to continue in his legacy and to bring to reality the dreams that he had for the Trust Fund for the victims, and where we cannot continue with him, that he stays with us in spirit and in our minds. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And with this, I'm closing the meeting.